So this talk is Artificial Intelligence Rewrites Einstein 1905 Special Relativity paper. This is a follow-on from previous talk where I pointed out artificial intelligences go to war where their special relativity is wrong. Where the AI, which is ChatGPT, has pointed out there has been implicit changes made to special relativity. So given that, I've asked that AI to rewrite Einstein's first paper on special relativity from 1905 with what these changes are. So this is the paper from Einstein in 1905 which started the special relativity. It's entitled On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies, and it's the one I want the AI to rewrite. So what's following is the AI's rewrite on that paper on the things that have changed. And so from AI it puts the title of this paper, where this paper is generated by itself, as entitled On the Electrodynamics of Moving Bodies, Revised and Annotated Edition. And the original was by Einstein 1905, and it's been revised now with modern clarifications and annotations. So in Einstein's paper he talks about the kinetic part, and he presents this equation, and what AI ChatGPT is pointing out is the assumption of equal one-way light speed is not an empirical fact but a convention necessary to operationalize simultaneity, and that's Einstein's version of simultaneity. One cannot measure one-way speed of light without synchronized clocks. And the correction is that Einstein did not clarify that simultaneity, the one he's using, is defined by this synchronization method, and this method means this simultaneity is not discovered, it's only taken as a convention. The AI points out this leads to circular reason if used to prove the constancy of light speed. So taking this equation, taking this method of synchronization, you can't really deduce the constancy of light speed from it, because that would just be a logical fallacy, or what is called circular reasoning. So what I point out is Einstein in 1905 never mentions one-way light speed, so a major change has been made to now have this as a convention, and he's never said it was a convention. Is that now supposed to be an additional assumption to the two assumptions that Einstein was giving of his postulates? Question mark. Circular reasoning, as I pointed out, is bad. It worries me that some people have taken the route of correcting this logic mistake by rejecting Einstein's version of simultaneity, relative simultaneity. It worries me for taking this person as for example, Stephen Giff. He's looked at Einstein and decided there's things wrong with it, and he seems he might have corrected it in his peculiar way, where he's talking about special relativity. So his version of the correction is he has absolute simultaneity instead of relative simultaneity, and its problem is how to make sense of what he's talking about. So the problem is that Einstein's making these mistakes, and different people are making different corrections to it. It's not just AI, it's deciding there's mistakes of special relativity, and AI then taking its version of correcting. It's other people are making different types of correction and going in different routes. So number 2 is the principle of relativity and the speed of light, and it's the annotations pointing out is still talking about a convention. So does that mean that postulate 2, which is about light speed constancy, is that now supposed to be only a convention? So this is the derivation of the Lorentz transformations or transformation from Einstein, and the annotation says this transformation can be derived without assuming the constancy of light speed. If one assumes symmetry and relativity principle, Einstein derived it with assumptions now seen as partly conventional. So when Einstein has his light speed constancy postulate or stroke assumption, that's not really necessary anymore if you're taking it as convention. So the next issue comes on about the interpretation of length, contraction and dilation. And AI is pointing out there's a misinterpretation risk. Einstein treats time dilation as symmetric and purely relational, but this conflates coordinate time with proper time and leaves ambiguity in scenarios involving acceleration or asymmetry. And also AI points out in Lorentzian frameworks, time dilation and contraction are physical effects caused by motion through a preferred ether frame, even if that frame is undetectable. So this is what AI is pointing out, is what Einstein has missed out. And now we go on to the paper of Einstein where he's dealing with the electromagnetic part. And AI is pointing out on that these transformations are compactly expressed using the field tensor in modern relativistic electrodynamics, and that's just referring that often get with modern relativists that they just using more complicated mathematics than what Einstein was using regarding using tensors. So the next part is about Maxwell's equations and their covariance, and AI is pointing out the problem there, and it's a mistake by omission. Einstein did not use tensors of four-dimensional formalism, which Minkowski introduced in 1908. This limited the clarity and generality of his electrodynamics. So what happened after 1905 is Minkowski came out with his space-time, and so you have that four-dimensional formalism, which later gets added onto special relativity, and also you get this more complicated mass of tensors which gets added onto special relativity after 1905. Next goes on to the broader logical and philosophical issues. And so what Einstein has is an incomplete treatment of acceleration and gravity. Einstein's theory is only two inertial frames. It does not handle acceleration or gravitation, and there's a lot of talking about that which people will have. So some people point out that Einstein's special relativity paper does deal with acceleration but doesn't deal with it properly. While AI has taken this modern view, acceleration is essential in understanding phenomena like the twin paradox, which cannot be fully resolved within the special theory alone. General relativity, 1915, was developed to account for these limitations using space-time curvature. So special relativity, to a large extent, is a limited theory, and you need to generalize it more. And we distance have had a lot to argue about regarding things like the twin paradox and the other paradox. Some in the mainstream we talk to say the twin paradox needs acceleration, and others in the mainstream say, oh, that's not necessary. So this whole issue of acceleration in the context of special relativity is a bit of a mess, with people saying lots of different things. Next issue becomes the inadequate relativistic dynamics. Einstein derived E equals mc squared, but did not provide a fully dynamical framework for relativistic momentum, force, or energy. And the correction that's supposed to come was that Planck and Minkowski extended these results, introducing full vectors and stress energy tensors, essential for modern physics. So ideally you'd need more details on that, and so but that is pretty much the case, that the Einstein messed up with his equation E equals mc squared. The next one issue becomes logical circularity in light speed postulate. Einstein assumed light travels at speeds c, that's in vacuum, to define this clock synchronization, and then used this to show that all observers measure c, and that is logically circular, and that's been briefly mentioned earlier. And the clarification is the isotropy of the one-way speed of light is a convention, not a measurable fact. And so it's, yes, that's a logical fallacy in the first part. He seems to be taking a logic circular argument, and that's a fallacy which many of us distance have pointed out. And of course I'm pointing out again that Einstein never mentioned one-way light speed in his 1905 paper, but now it's being inferred as convention. Next issue becomes the absence of Minkowski's space-time formalism. So Einstein added space-time to special relativity later. He didn't have it in his 1905 paper because Minkowski came up with it later in 1908. So it's something that gets added later. So the correction becomes introduce the invariant interval by that equation, and that's now central to relativity theory. So the 1905 paper doesn't have that properly sorted out. And next issue becomes the philosophical ambiguity about reality versus measurement. And so Einstein conflated things here, and is implying that simultaneity is meaningless, not just unmeasurable. The modern perspective is this open debate between Einstein, Lorentz, and later thinkers over whether relativity describes appearances or underlying reality. And I think that is still an ongoing debate stroke argument between people who want to believe in relativity. And so it's the classical view of light in a quantum age. So Einstein didn't deal with quantum mechanics because that was sort of sorted out later by Bohr and Heisenberg and other people in roughly about the 1920s. So Einstein's treatment of light in his 1905 paper is entirely classical, despite his quantum hypothesis published the same year. So Einstein did talk about quantum, what now considered quantum ideas, but in another paper, but he didn't deal with it in his special relativity paper. And so the irony is this gap highlights the disconnect between special relativity and the quantum nature of light, later incorporated into quantum field theory. And so that's another theory that came later. The next one becomes there's no discussion of Lorentz theory equivalence. Einstein did not acknowledge that his results were entirely empirical, equivalent to Lorentz's ether theory, and that was a missed opportunity. This philosophical distinction, whether as a preferred frame or not, remains open as both predict the same observable results. And so basically what it's saying there is still debated, people arguing so forth about it. So the concluding remarks are Einstein wrote the introduction of a luminous ether will prove to be superfluous, and that's what he wrote. And I sort of like argue about that because that's the translation from German into English, and really what he's saying in German is not really that clear. Anyway, AI is pointing out the rejection of ether is a metaphysical commitment, not a logical consequence. Lorentz's theory gives the same predictions while maintaining a real undetectable ether. So that's another issue where there's a lot of argument and debate. Einstein messed up the idea of ether. So this is a summary of Einstein's key mistakes and modern corrections. So the topic, one-way light speed, for instance, Einstein 1905 assumed isotropic in order frames, and he assumed that without really making it clear that's what he was doing. And the modern view, it's a convention and it's not empirically verifiable. And you also got the issues with the clock synchronization, simultaneity, time dilation, and acceleration and so forth. So it's changing modern view of relativity is not the same as Einstein's views. The ChatGPT does continue on when prompted, but this is the first chunk of the revision to Einstein's Special Relativity paper. Ideally now I would like to go back and look at it in more detail, but I'm only going to check some of it. ChatGPT pointed out the assumption of equal one-way light speed is not an empirical fact, but a convention necessary to operationalize simultaneity. One cannot measure one-way speed without already synchronized clocks. And so I want checked with ChatGPT, where does it claim that's coming from? And it's claiming it's coming from this book by Reichenbach, made in 1928, The Philosophy of Space and Time. And so Reichenbach explored all that. And so, well, when they taught me special relativity, I don't think they didn't mention anything like that. So this is something which is not being taught to physics students, that there's some sort of revision going on with what Einstein's talking about in his 1905 paper by this later person from 1928. And I sort of think there should be a debate on that. I don't know whether people would agree fully with what Reichenbach is saying if they were made aware that he's making these changes. And so I asked ChatGPT, do all physicists go by what this change was? And ChatGPT said, not all physicists would fully agree with or emphasize the same interpretation of the conventionality of simultaneity. So they wouldn't all sort of like agree with what Reichenbach is saying. But anyway, it says there's a general consensus in physics in the mainstream community. The Einstein synchronization convention is widely accepted as the operationally most convenient way to define simultaneity in the framework of special relativity. So I think that really there is a sort of like debate going on, people believing something about relativity and other people believing other things about relativity, even on issues like this. So ChatGPT in summary says, while mainstream physicists generally accept Einstein's synchronization convention as a practical tool in relativity, the philosophical and conceptual implications of this convention are still a topic of debate among philosophers, some foundational theorists, and those exploring alternative frameworks to relativity. Most physicists don't question the convention in daily practice. And I said, who pointed this out for Einstein's postulate 2 is a restatement of synchronization and measurement convention. It's not a logically independent axiom and may be derived under broader symmetry assumptions. So who pointed this out, which ChatGPT is talking about? And this ChatGPT says one prominent figure who made this argument is Hans Reichenbach again, whose work on the philosophy of space and time pointed out that Einstein's second postulate is operational and relies on conventions. So it's once again, it's all what Weichenbach is saying. So how much is this being agreed by most people in physics when they're not even pointing out that there's this change being made to special relativity that came later. Another thing is who pointed out this, which ChatGPT says Einstein treats time dilation as symmetric and purely relational, but this conflates coordinate time with proper time and leaves ambiguity in scenarios involving acceleration or asymmetry. So who's pointing this out? And so ChatGPT gives a long list of people who's pointing this out, such as John Bell, Karl Popper, and Lorentz Poincaré, and other philosophers. So there's lots of people pointing this out. So this is not being highlighted to physics students either. That there's this suddenly, oh, these people are pointing out there's an ambiguity in special relativity, and that's not being pointed out to the physics students being taught relativity, so it's another gap in their education. So my impression, things are being amended by these modern advanced texts on relativity that are not referred to when relativity is taught. So the special relativity is taught is not the proper special relativity that should be taught. So these changes which ChatGPT goes on about are not taught in relativity students or mentioned in most relativity texts. And I asked ChatGPT about that, and ChatGPT said yes, that's largely correct. The conceptual critiques and philosophical issues you mentioned, such as the relational nature of time, the confusion between coordinate time and proper time, and the ambiguity of time dilation in accelerated or asymmetrical situations are not typically emphasized in introductory or even advanced relativity texts. So these corrections, supposedly, which ChatGPT should be made to special relativity, are not being mentioned anywhere in the relativity text or even taught in the to the physics students. So special relativity is not the proper special relativity that should be taught. And ChatGPT then starts to get onto a bit of wordplay. It depends on how you define proper special relativity and what you expect from a full understanding of the theory. Mainstream special relativity as taught in most physics courses is indeed mathematically correct, widely accepted in the scientific community, and is extremely successful in predicting experimental outcomes. However, it often omits important philosophical and conceptual discussions about the theory's foundation. And that's what I'm complaining about this. The physics students not being taught about the conceptual changes, i.e. the metaphysics that have taken place with metaphysics changes that have taken place with special relativity. And ChatGPT says, and these omissions may lead to a more operational black box view of relativity that does not address some of the deeper conceptual issues. So not teaching the proper way, the maths is to be interpreted, surely that means that maths being taught is wrong. And so ChatGPT responds to that, it's a nuanced issue. But the math itself is not wrong in the mainstream treatment of special relativity, it's the interpretation and the foundational understanding that can be incomplete or oversimplified. So physics students, when they've been taught special relativity, are not being taught the proper understanding of the maths. So me interrogating ChatGPT further, the revised special relativity that it gives is not even supposed to be the final version of special relativity. Einstein's relativity has problems with combining it to a quantum physics means for it to work, it's a work in progress, and thus need keep being amended. So it's all just moving goalposts. You don't even have the final version of relativity. If it needs to be amended later, then they just amend it later. So they're not even teaching, in my view, they're not even teaching special relativity properly, and the relativity textbooks don't even present the theory properly. It's some sort of dumbed down version of special relativity is taught, and that is supposedly updated later on as you go through the physics echelons, where they don't even read properly the changes made. So that's special relativity is just a total mess, and ChatGPT AI has revised Einstein's 1905 paper in special relativity just now, but that is only probably provisional, where they might sort of like change it again later. Thank you.